ancient creature remains at large, embedded deep within Scottish folklore.
It's an animal big enough to bite a car in half.
Sightings seem to defy scientific explanation.
Did you see something on Loch Ness that you cannot explain?
Yes.
Leaving no stone unturned, the hunt is on.
Broadcasting live from the dark and cold dungeons deep beneath the KLAV studios in Las Vegas, Nevada. Prepare yourselves to be taken away into another dimension as we now have control over your thoughts, fears, and perspective of the unexplained world you dare not speak of. With your hosts, Lindsay Knight and Michael Knight. Ladies and gentlemen, we now open the gates to the paranormal and beyond.
Broadcasting live from the KLAV studios in Las Vegas, Nevada, this is the Paranormal and Beyond. As children, we all grow up hearing terrifying stories of monsters hiding underneath our beds, but as we grow older, these tall tales seem to become more of a reality as we start to learn that these monsters do in fact exist. For example, since the 6th century to the present day, in the waters off Loch Ness in the Scottish Highlands, reports of a large unknown beast has been seen and witnessed by many. But the question that remains, does the monster that we all know of as Nessie still exist, and does it continue to lurk within the waters of Loch Ness? In a moment, Angus Dinsdale, son of the late great Nessie hunter Tim Dinsdale, will be joining us on the program to share his father's evidence and work, as well as share his personal adventures seeking out the elusive Loch Ness Monster alongside his father. So get ready, because it's all coming up straight ahead when we return right here on the Talk of Las Vegas, KLAV 1230 AM.
Your ticket to the unknown is at KnightsParanormalResearchSociety.com. UFOs, ghosts, aliens, hauntings, mysterious places and more can be found at KnightsParanormalResearchSociety.com. Knights with a K, ParanormalResearchSociety.com. Based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, Knights Paranormal Research Society is owned and operated by the renowned brother and sister team of Michael and Lindsay Knight. Seeing is believing. And at KnightsParanormalResearchSociety.com, you're going to believe. Join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight, for the Paranormal and Beyond. Join host Michael Knight and Lindsay Knight as they investigate the unexplained and most controversial mysteries of the world. The Paranormal and Beyond, where the paranormal lives on and conspiracies exposed. The Paranormal and Beyond, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight. Brought to you by Knights Paranormal Research Society.com.
Just because you've seen it in the news doesn't mean it's real.
So you're telling me you got physically attacked by a ghost?
Like, I can tell you right now, I believe in the paranormal more than I believe in our government.
There are so many mysteries out there that are still yet to be explained.
You folks have some of your facts wrong, and you just keep talking about generalities.
With all due respect, sir, you have not brought anything to the table to prove us wrong.
This is the Paranormal and Beyond, and it's your show. Call us at 731-1230. Here again, Michael Knight and Lindsay Knight.
Welcome back to another brand new edition of the Paranormal and Beyond. But first, be sure to check us out at KnightsParanormalResearchSociety.com, where you can link up to all the past shows by simply clicking on that archive link above. That's KnightsParanormalResearchSociety.com. Ever want to be an actor? Well, here's your chance by simply log on to HollywoodBoundActingAcademy.com. Again, that's HollywoodBoundActingAcademy.com. Special shout out to all those listening worldwide through the KLAV 1230am.com website, and all of you driving around in the Vegas Valley listening to us on your stereos. I'm your host, Michael Knight. Joined alongside of me is Lindsay Knight, Jessica Johns of Wartime Paranormal, and David Gleason of the EOG Sports Hour, which can be heard here on this station Monday through Friday from 10 to 11. How are all of you guys doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm doing good. Yes.
I just brought the show to a screeching halt. You asked me a rhetorical question, and I gave you an answer. And slammed on the brakes.
The mind goes places we do not want to talk about, except for on the show. How are you doing, Lindsay?
I'm doing well. How are you? How's everybody doing tonight?
I just asked that.
Well, I'm asking it too.
That's a copyright infringement of what I just said.
Anyways.
All right, get prepared to get a cease and desist just for that. Jessica, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. It was a long week, but got through it. And, Friday and Saturday's football games were crazy, so.
All right.
That was the last hour, Jessica.
I know.
That's my beat. We're here to talk
So bad I wasn't
paranormal.
there.
We're here to talk about the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
All right, we got a great show lined up as we have Angus Dinsdale, which is going to talk about the Loch Ness Monster and his father's work, the late, great Tim Dinsdale, who filmed that famous footage that we all know of today. But first, let's get into today's news.
Topping the news for the paranormal and beyond this Monday, December 2nd, bringing you up-to-the-minute news on all the strange and bizarre happenings around the globe. A retired U.S. Army colonel was supposed to receive a burial at Arlington National Cemetery. What the career military man got was degradation beyond words. Joseph Melvin Chapman died at age 80 on November 21st, which his family gathered to lay him to rest. Their sorrow quickly turned to shock and anger as they realized his body had been switched with another dead man's. The Everly Funeral Home in Fairfax mixed up the bodies and dressed the wrong man in the deceased vet's uniform, which he actually worked 28 years to earn. The manager of the Everly Funeral Home said the Chapman was buried in Winchester and that the judge will have to order an examination in order to retrieve the body. In other news, 262 pounds of pot falls from the San Diego sky. 2 people were arrested. These suspected drug dealers got high, really high, but the marijuana they allegedly hope to deliver won't be getting anyone high at all. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection found that 262 pounds of marijuana bundled tightly together in San Diego. 2 men showed up to claim the prize and were quickly arrested. Officials say an ultralight aircraft coming from Mexico dropped the massive payload, which was then tied to a large metal cage, which used to hold cargo, and dropped it in a field. The Office of the Air and Marine tracked the plane as it crossed the border. Reporting the news for the Paranormal and Beyond, this is Lindsay Knight.
Yeah, let that happen in Las Vegas. This town will turn into the zombie apocalypse. There'll be no more food.
No, there wouldn't. And I was about to say that that's not even news in Portland. I lived in Portland for several years, and just pot falling from the sky. It's like everyday occurrence.
You're trying to say everybody's high there.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, I was going to say, does it really rain pot over there?
No, metaphorically it does.
If so, I'm sure that the Jonas Brothers and Miley Cyrus and Demi Lovato make their way over.
The streets smell of pot. You can smell it everywhere you go.
All right, let's get into our main topic because our special guest, Angus Dinsdale, is the author of The Man Who Filmed Nessie, whereupon Angus himself takes great pleasure and pride in sharing his family's involvement chasing the mysterious monster of Loch Ness. Angus draws his own unique experiences of being on many expeditions with his father, the late Tim Dinsdale, who is world-renowned for seeking out the Loch Ness Monster and who also filmed the infamous footage of the creature which we all know of today. Angus himself gives an insider's view of the monster hunting the heydays of the 1960s and 70s in his exciting new biography, The Man Who Filmed Nessie, on which explores Tim's true life adventures from childhood in an imperial China, where he was kidnapped by pirates, to a chance reading of a magazine article which changed his life forever. This true story of a dedicated family man who left his successful career as an aeronautical engineer to find proof of the existence regarding Loch Ness is no doubt a compelling example of one man's passion and dedication to search for the truth. The Paranormal and Beyond would like to welcome all the way from Vancouver, Canada, Angus Dinsdale. How you doing, Angus?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right, this is a fascinating story, and I mean, as a kid, you grew up actually hunting. So you said hunting monsters.
We did as a family. That was our normal thing to do on our summer holidays, our vacations. Often we would go with my father, the whole family in troop. Off we went, either staying in a variety of guest houses or caravans, or even on boats on the loch.
So, how old were you when you really got into it and started, really knowing what your father was doing?
Well, that's an interesting question, Michael. The reality is, the night that I was born, my father was on TV for the first time, showing his film. And my mother was in labor, and the doctor came in and had just watched this on Panorama, a BBC television program, and came in and saw the name Dinsdale and said, well, that's an interesting name. I've just been watching this chap on TV talking about the Loch Ness Monster. And my mother said, yeah, that's my husband, but can you get on with this now? I'm about to give birth. So quite literally, the night I was born was when Nessie was introduced to the world.
Your father being the first one, right, to capture this footage?
Well, I mean, the first one, he got the cine film, which is a 60-second cine film. Everything up until then had basically been still photographs. And many of them since have been questioned whether they were actually authentic or not. But my father's film is the one that's really stood the test of time. Now,
he did get a lot of notoriety, but did he also get a lot of scrutiny throughout his remaining, the whole time that, he did this search for this?
With any of these subjects you get, whether it's Bigfoot or UFOs or Nessie, you get the people who believe it, and you get the people who don't care one way or another, and then you get the naysayers. And the naysayers will always have a reason to say something that this can't exist or won't exist. They're not open enough to take a look at it.
During this time, how did your mother take to this? Was she very supportive?
My mother, long-suffering mother. In the early years, you've got to remember that when my father did this, I roll the clock back to 1959, he was reading a magazine article quite literally. He had never really any interest in the monster or the legend of it, and he was reading a magazine article, and he came across this passage there that said the day that I saw the Loch Ness Monster. And he read the article and gave it over to my mother and said, what do you think? And she famously turned around and said, well, I think there's probably something in it. It's been around for a long time. So my father took that on from then as a hobby, and just started to investigate sighting reports. And over the next 12 months, he investigated 100 sightings. And then he got to the point where he thought, he was a trained engineer, so his logical brain said, well, there's probably something there. So he took himself off up to the loch, and on day 6 of being there, he took this, which is now a famous film. And so getting back to your question, what did my mother think? Her reaction was, well, if it only took him 6 days to film it, shouldn't be a problem. Should be able to go back up there and film it again. 27 years later, she wouldn't say the same thing.
Being passionate your father was, did he end up leaving his career altogether to chase Nessie down?
He did. Eventually, yes. It was he changed over a period of about 8 years, and then finally in 1968 became a full-time Nessie hunter, as he called himself. He would spend anything between 4 to 8 weeks to 10 weeks to 12 weeks at the loch at a time, and then in the winter months he would make a living via giving lectures or talks and writing books.
There has been many sightings over numerous years about different lake monsters, all over the globe. Was the Loch Ness his main focus, or did he actually go around to different areas in different states looking for different types of lake monsters?
Well, he didn't actually go to other places. It was Loch Ness was his main focus. He did go and do some expeditions at a place called Loch Morar, which is on the west coast of Scotland, and that is reputed to have a similar animal in the loch as the same as in Loch Ness. He did. He went up there for a number of expeditions, and I went on one of those expeditions with him as well. Actually, we didn't see anything, but no. But my father was very much a focal point from people around the world that would contact him as he became more knowledgeable on the subject of lake monsters.
We obviously don't have any physical evidence to support Loch Ness, besides the footage and what have you, but you doing as much research as your father did and, spending numerous years, on the Loch Ness, can you tell us on your point of view what you think this is? Could this be something that is a descendant from the dinosaur that has been living in the lake for numerous years?
Good question. I mean, we've banded this around our family and other people throughout my whole life. What could it be? The thing is that my father was a very well-educated man and a straight thinker. He wasn't somebody to go off at a whim. What he saw that day so affected him that it changed his life, that he continued for the rest of his life. His next 27 years, he took 56 monster hunting expeditions to the Loch, because what he had seen on that day was a real creature. It was an animal, and he saw it sitting in the water 6 feet high. He said it was a dark hue color, reddish brown, with a blotch on its side, and then it started to move. And once it was going across the Loch, he could actually see these paddle strokes from the side of the animal's back. This so affected him that he said it has to be some sort of creature that was large, literally probably at least 40 feet in size, and being able to propel itself at a high speed, because his film was the creature was recorded at between 7 and 10 miles an hour. So it would have to be have flippers, have a tail. That was the form of propulsion. So what sort of creature could it be? And we talked about all these different things. And when you say about plesiosaur is the one that always comes to hand, is that people always mention, is it a plesiosaur? Well, the reality is the makeup of a plesiosaur, it couldn't be, because it would have been seen more often. But in similarities, then yes, the plesiosaur does seem to be an animal that it looks like and behaves like, yet it doesn't get seen often enough, so it can't be an air breather. And so the question goes around and around and around, which is part of the endearing mystery about the whole thing.
Do you think that, because the earliest story of the Loch Ness Monster came about the 6th century, do you think that there could be more than one of them? Because it obviously can't be the same creature from hundreds of years ago.
No, of course it can't. I think that it may well live a great length of time, but also some of the sonar work that was done during the late 60s and early 70s turned up some very interesting results, and there were some large contacts. I mean, the loch is 24 miles long, and at the deepest point, over 900 feet, averaging 700 feet deep. It's a big body of water, and when you're trolling down with a sonar beam, you're only taking a certain area, tiny curtain, electronic curtain across the loch. But there was hits, as they would call them, targets that were found in various different spots along the loch. So one would assume that there was more than one animal in there.
When your father captured that famous footage that, that's all over today, he did extensive work on, proving the size by putting a boat out there. And I watched it, and it's very compelling. But how long did it take your father to put that out to the world before he was ready to do so?
Well, Michael, that's an interesting point, is that my dad, being a trained engineer, he realized when he filmed this thing that he would need a point of reference, because it was just this black blob in the middle of the loch. So he went back to the hotel where he was staying, and he talked to the proprietor of the hotel, and he took out his 14-foot wooden fishing boat, and my father went back to the same spot where he'd filmed the creature an hour earlier, and used the remaining few feet in his camera to film the boat, which gives it a wonderful comparison. And that was in April 1960. And he went on to Panorama in June of 1960. So it's 2 months afterwards. And he'd been to see a number of people. He was very disappointed with the reaction of the scientists of the day at the British Museum, who really just ignored it and said it couldn't possibly happen. And then when he went on national TV, you've got to remember back in 1960, it sounds crazy now, but back then there was only two television channels, so you were either watching one or the other. So my father's film was seen by something like about 15 million people and across the nation. And so it was the talking point from then on.
Did he actually kickstart the whole search for the Loch Ness and coin the term Nessie?
I think Nessie had been around a while. I know my father coined the term Nessie weather, and that was always when the weather was beautiful and the loch was flat calm, which doesn't happen very often in the north of Scotland, I might add. Nessie, the modern day Nessie hunting can be traced back to his film being the catalyst of that. Before that, there was some odd expeditions, notably in 1934 with Marmaduke Wetherell, the famous big game hunter, and of course that's all the controversy with the head and the surgeon's photograph. That's the famous image of the swan-like head and neck black and white picture. And so you had that, and then of course the road was built. The North Road was built in 1934-35, and there was more sightings, and there were some still pictures through the 1950s. But my father's film was what really kicked it off. In 1962, after my father's film was shown on BBC Panorama, a chap called David James, who was an MP at the time, put together a consortium of people and started the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau. And that went on for 10 years.
Now, there has been numerous people who have come out to pretty much, go to the water and comb it for Loch Ness, correct, over the years?
Absolutely. Research has continued on since my father died in 1987, yeah. How
deep is that lake?
The lake is, in the deepest point, it goes down to just a little over 900 feet. Its average depth is 700. It's like a big trench, basically. You go from the shoreline, it basically goes straight down.
You know, there's stories about Nessie with a cave system. Have you heard of that?
Well, again, there's growing up, Michael, can you imagine the stories we used to have around our dining room table at night?
Yeah, that's what I want to get into next.
Hiding and stuff like that. And there's always been the legend. You would meet some of the old locals there. I remember these old, crofters, sheep farmers who've been living off the land for hundreds of years, basically. And they would have all these beautiful, wonderful yarns about the monster, these great stories. And, of course, it was always Nessie's lair that they would stay. Nessie would be hiding in these caverns, in these caves. And there's a chap called Marty Klein, an MIT graduate who came in 1970. He came with the Academy of Applied Science out of Boston, and he built this side-scan sonar unit. Incredibly brilliant man, and an amazing sonar setup. And they towed it from my father's boat. And they found the walls of the loch that came down very steep, and they actually did find undercuts, and they christened them Klein's Caves of Loch Ness. So I mean, the rumors that there are caves and places where the animal could potentially hide is actually true.
Now, I know you said that your father was mainly focused on the Loch Ness Monster. But do you have any interest in some of our lake monsters, like the one at Lake Champlain, like Champ is what they call them? Because some of those pictures resemble the pictures of the Loch Ness Monster.
Nessie was my father's thing. We did it as a family all the way up until we were middle teenagers. And then, of course, you start going off and forging your own way in life. And then when my father passed away, we still, as a family, still get stuff coming to us just because of our name, because of our connection with Loch Ness. It's an interest. Absolutely, it's an interest. Do I pursue it? Not very much.
As far as Loch Ness goes back, Scotland is, very, very old, obviously, and there's so many stories about, different things that, wars and what have you in Scotland. But as far as the Loch Ness goes, how far back does that go as far as stories of people?
You mean with Nessie?
Yes.
Yes. There's been talk of the water kelpie, and that's the legend. That's the folklore in Scotland is water kelpie. As you said, back to St. Columba in the 6th century, and literally there's folklore history of something strange in that water all the way through from then.
You know, between you and your father's work, did you come up on any stories about, Nessie attacking boats or people?
No, is the answer, is the straightforward answer to that. There is a story which is in my book, and it was in 1969 in Loch Morar, which really kicked off the interest in Loch Morar. There have been stories of a lake monster there for a number of years, but because it's really off the beaten track, it's quite difficult to get to, and the locals didn't want to talk it, spread it around or make it a tourist thing. They call it Morag. That's their monster. But there was a story that came out in 1969 of two friends that were in a boat out fishing on the Loch Morar, and they heard a splash and turned around and saw one of these creatures swimming towards the boat, and came up and knocked the side of the boat. The chap on there got an oar that he had, and fending the boat away from the creature, because he was concerned that it was going to tip the boat over, and in doing so he broke the oar in the process. And the other chap was on the boat with him, had a small caliber rifle and fired it over the animal's head. It then dived down. Now this sounds an amazing story, but these two were just ordinary lorry drivers. They were truck drivers who would take the catch from the fishing boats, and they would take that down to Glasgow each week. And they were just there having a fish on a sunny afternoon, enjoying themselves. They came back and were telling the story to some people who leaked it. They were very annoyed, and they never spoke publicly about it. But that's the only one that I can really recall.
There's an interesting story as well about your father being kidnapped by pirates. What's the story behind that?
Well, my father was brought up in Imperial China, meaning it was before the communist takeover in 1938. His father was a shipping agent in China, and my father went with his sister and brother and were taken off to be taken to school, as they did in those days. And there was a 500-mile trip by ship, so they went from Shanghai up to a place called Chifu. And as the ship left harbor, it was out of harbor for about half a day, and there were 70 expat school children on board, and these pirates jumped out and took over the ship. Obviously, they were going to hold the school children for ransom. There was guards on the ship, so there was an ensuing gun battle, and the kids were all shoved and locked into rooms and everything. And then eventually, 3 days later, the Royal Navy came around and rescued them. So it was quite exciting for him. It was quite an exciting time. And again, that story's in the book. I've written that as his, developing his character as such.
That's fascinating, remarkable. I could only imagine being taken by pirates. Let's see,
10 years old, being taken by pirates, held for 3 days. Oh wow! Threatened with guns, and there was a dead body that he had to walk past, and all of this. Yeah, it would have been quite something. Yeah.
All right, Angus, hold it right there. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about your expeditions with your father and stories and, the juicy stuff when we return right here on the Talk of Las Vegas, KLAV 1230 AM.
Don't go away. The Paranormal and Beyond continues in a moment. Join us at 731-1230. Join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight for The Paranormal and Beyond. Join host Michael Knight and Lindsay Knight as they investigate the unexplained and most controversial mysteries of the world. The Paranormal and Beyond, where the paranormal lives on and conspiracies exposed. The Paranormal and Beyond, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight. Brought to you by Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com. Your ticket to the unknown is at Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com. UFOs, ghosts, aliens, hauntings, Mysterious places and more can be found at Knights Paranormal Research Society.com. Knights with a K, Paranormal Research Society.com. Based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, Knights Paranormal Research Society is owned and operated by the renowned brother and sister team of Michael and Lindsay Knight. Seeing is believing. And at Knights Paranormal Research Society.com, you're going to believe.
You are now in the mix with the Paranormal Beyond, only on KLAV 130 AM.
Welcome back to the Paranormal and Beyond. Join us at 731-1230. Here again, Lindsay and Michael.
All right, if you're just tuning in, we are talking with Angus Dinsdale about the Loch Ness Monster and his father's work. But remember to check us out at Knights Paranormal Research Society.com and check out those past episodes if you were sleeping through the whole weekend. All right. Angus, are you still there?
I'm still here. Yeah.
Okay, how long was your adventures last with your father?
Well, I went up, the first time I went up was when I was 7 years old on expedition. And we went up almost every year after that for the next 5 or 6 years. We would go for the whole summer. We would go up there and spend sometimes 5 and 6 weeks with my father, depending on what he was doing and what his research was taking him. And we would actually be part of the expedition team. You know, I was a 10-year-old boy driving a boat across Loch Ness, and my sister would be sitting in the cockpit there with a camera at the ready, because wherever we went at Loch Ness at all times, somebody had a camera ready. That was our mantra. That's what we had to do. And we had wonderful fun. Can you imagine that as a young child growing up? And my father would always get us excited about going and hunting monsters.
During your expeditions and your father's whole way of doing things, was it strictly filming, or were you trying to actually capture this beast?
Well, we did a number of stuff. There was a number of different experiments. Of course, there was the famous 1972 picture with Bob Rhines and the Academy of Applied Science. So that was the underwater picture that got a still picture of the side of the animal, and it shows its flipper. It's definitely the animal. There's no doubt about that. And that was in the waters off Urquhart Bay, just under Urquhart Castle. What we used to do when I was with my father and the team that we were with, we would put out traps and see what the food source was like in the loch to see if it could sustain a large group of predators.
I have to ask you, in all the years that you've been going up to the lake, from when you were a child till, I don't know how recent you've been up there, but have you or any of your colleagues actually firsthand seen accounts?
Well, we had an account. We had something. We had a sighting when I was 8 years old, and I remember it quite vividly. We were in my father's car. He had a great big old Jaguar, and there were 6 of us in this car. It was bench seats as they used to have back in those days, and it was just dusk, and we were driving back towards our large catamaran that we were all staying on. And as is your wont when you're at Loch Ness, you always look at the loch, if you're not driving, that is. You have your eyes on the water. And the trees had grown up in this one area. And I knew that as we came around this particular bend that there would be a gap, and we would look across this small bay where there was a little island called Cherry Island. And as we came round, my brother shouted, "What's that?" And my father, who was driving at the time, hit the brakes, and in the few yards that it took to stop the vehicle and he jumped out and ran back. There was nothing there. And all of us in the car, of course, except my father, saw this in the middle of the bay. Well, the way we described it was like an upturned boat, just sitting in the middle of the bay. And it was, of course, it was seconds because we were driving and we were past the area very quickly. But it was also only seconds until my father got back there, and my brother was with him, and there was nothing there. So what was it? Where did it go? 5 people in that car saw it. It was big. It was probably 8 or 10 feet long, standing probably 3 or 4 feet out of the water, and suddenly nothing was there. There was no ripples. There was no engine noise of a boat. Gone. We drove back to our large catamaran, which was about 5 minutes drive away. And by the time we got there, I was walking down with my sisters towards I was ahead of the rest of the group, and I walked down, and the waves were breaking on the shore, tossing and turning the large catamaran from a wake of some sort, and it was on a perfectly calm evening. So that was my experience.
The Loch Ness Monster is, I would say, because the ocean, the water is so massive and so big. And just even up until recently, I believe in October, they are finding new creatures in the water every day. Like they found an 18-foot sea monster, which they say in California. So, it is not hard to believe that there is something in that water. They have said that they have found different creatures up until recently, up until last month. So I totally believe that there would be something in there. It goes way back hundreds of years.
It's like a whole other world, though, down there in the oceans and the lakes. You never know what's down there.
Yeah, and also there has to be mysteries in the world, right? We'd be such a lesser place if there wasn't a mystery. I love the whole thing around Nessie because it always gives you just enough to keep you going back. There's just enough evidence of some very intelligent people who are involved, highly qualified PhDs that would go back year after year. And these people wouldn't do it unless they were convinced there was something worth finding there. To your point, that you've got to remember is that before the last ice age, Loch Ness was connected to the sea. And once the ice age came and then the ice rescinded, the earth lifted and then cut off the loch from the sea. So there's a theory that there could have been marine animals that came in and maybe used the loch as a breeding area and got trapped. That's the theory. And well, who knows what they could develop into over the years.
You also write something interesting in your book, how this phenomena began with your father way back in a haunted house in Quebec.
Well, my mother had that. It wasn't my dad. What was very interesting about that, when they first got married, my mother and father moved to Canada. My father being an aeronautical engineer, Canada was the hub of aeronautics at that time. And they moved to Quebec, and they rented what my father thought was this beautiful house overlooking the St. Lawrence River. It was a period house, so had lots of charm and everything. But my mum was a young lady. She was only 20 years old, away from home, pregnant for the first time. Her husband off at work all day. She was left there, and of course at that time there was very few English speakers, and I'm afraid she didn't speak French. So she found it very lonely, but she definitely found that there was something strange in that house. There was no doubt about that. To one point where one chap who came to stay and was a colleague of my father's was sitting down one evening and saw the curtains move on the staircase just above him, and shot out of his chair to go and see what was going on. And my father said, well, it must just be the wind blowing. Well, the storm shutters were closed, and it was a perfectly still night. So my mum got rather nervous about the place, and then when another friend came to stay and said there was something strange about the landing on the stairs, that was it. She packed her bags. She wasn't staying there any longer.
Your father's also an author and authored 2 books, correct?
My father's written 4 books.
4 books.
Yeah, he did, and they were all on. Well, he wrote 3 specifically on Nessie, and one called the Leviathans, and that's about strange sea monsters around the world.
And Project Waterhorse as well, right?
Project Waterhorse was very much that was about his expeditions and the human factor that goes on that went on at Loch Ness. Yeah, the human element that went there, that was the effort that was put in.
being interested in the Loch Ness yourself, are you also interested in other cryptoids? Like, do you research other ones now?
Not really. I mean, my interest in the Loch Ness is it stems from my father's work. I take a mild interest in it, and as I said to you before, we get as a family we get included because of the name and the work. 25 years later, since my father died, we're still in that loop. And one of the reasons that I decided to write the book when I did was that a lot the people who were there at the time in the heyday of the monster hunting in the 60s and 70s are moving on. They're passing away, and so that wealth of knowledge and information and stuff for those people I knew as a 10-year-old boy was starting to disappear. So I thought, now's the time to get this down. Now's the time to record it. And as you get the stories from the horse's mouth. Most of them was because I was there, but also I wanted to make sure that I got the facts right and what we did, and I've turned it into a fun story.
One thing I loved about your father's film is because it was dated back in the 60s. Not like today, when you see film, it could be easily doctored with technology right now. So when I look at that, it's like 100% genuine and authentic, and it's hard to dispute compared to other videos you see floating around there where it's nothing but BS.
Yes. I mean, roll back the years, there wasn't computer manipulation back then. We didn't. It was actually to enhance anything was wrong. You were tampering with the evidence. So what you see is exactly what he filmed. He always said what the film shows is a rather poor indication of what he saw through his binoculars in the viewfinder of his camera. You got to remember the camera that he used was a clockwork wind-up camera. It was a Bolex. It wasn't very, it was old at the time, and that's in 1960. And he didn't have a particularly powerful lens on it either. And it was at particularly long distance. It was 1,300 meters when he first started filming it, and up to 1,800 meters when it's submerged. But to your point, Michael, no, it is great because it's black and white. It's fidgety. It's not clear. It's at great distance. But it really makes you scratch your head because when you look at that thing and you say that was measured by photographic experts from the RAF. The arm is called JERIC, which is a Joint Air Reconnaissance Intelligence Center. And now these guys are people who take pictures from spy planes and what have you, and do all the investigating on it. They took a look at that film, and they measured it, and they said the object is 5 feet out of the water, 6 feet wide, and it moves up to between 7 and 10 miles an hour. And their report is that it's not a boat, and it's not a submarine, so it's probably animate, meaning it's alive. And these were top professional people in their field,
I thought it was really interesting to see how to see him recreate it with the boat to show you the difference between like what a boat would leave behind and what the monster left behind, like as far as like the ripple effect and everything. I thought that was really cool.
Well, isn't it? It does. I mean, one of the things that when my father's film gets shown on TV periodically, people they forget to show the comparison. So one of the reasons that I've decided to post it on my website, the Man Who Filmed Nessie.com, is that you can see the film in its entirety, and I do there's some enlargements of it as well, and some side-by-side comparisons. And it really does. I mean, I say, take a look at it. If you think that's a boat, then more power to you. I just want everybody to have their own opinion.
Now, there is a shrine pretty much, right, in the lake. I mean, there's people that flock to stay there and camp out, even today, like all day, right?
Holy, it's a mecca of it's a tourist attraction, that's for sure. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Loch Ness and the surrounding area gets around 500,000 visitors a year.
That is insane.
And it's incredible. It is a massive industry, and when I was a kid growing up, it wasn't like that at all. It was just a few sheep and a couple of farmers, and this little band of renegade sort of sort of students who would come up and stay at this little campsite. There was 4 or 5 caravans with a camera site called the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau, and that ran for 10 years. And people would come up there, give their 2 weeks vacation time, and they would stay there, and they would go out and watch the loch, and they would be at various points up and down the loch and do all these different experiments and what have you. That was it. That was the sum total of what went on at the loch. And then eventually, in the late 60s and the early 70s, it started to become a tourist attraction. And, of course, what happens when tourists start to come, then you get the commercial centers that start to appear, the interpretation centers and all of this. And of course, there's a wonderful castle on the shores of Loch Ness.
That famous castle.
Castle Urquhart, that was burnt down deliberately by the retreating Scottish because they didn't want the English lords to take it over, so they burnt it down. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. It's wonderful history. And of course, then you're looking across this mass of water, this ink black Loch Ness because of the peat that's washed down from the mountainside, and so it looks sinister. And, it just does. And of course, there's this monster in there. Well, people love it. They flock to the place.
Is the lake cordoned off? Because I know there's, like you said, like over 500,000 people. I'm pretty sure everybody wants to get in their boat and get in the water.
There's plenty of on-water tour cruises each day, I think, that people take. I haven't been up there for a few years. My brother was up there a couple of years ago, and he tells me it's quite amazing what's happened is that the local city council have decided to let all the trees grow up so that as you drive down the road on the side of the loch, you don't get any view of it. And also all the pull-ins, where you used to be able to pull in and stop and take a look at the loch, they've all been shut off. And the reason for that is there were so many accidents with people losing concentration, looking at the loch.
Wow!
So it became a very dangerous road. So probably, let's say it's something like about 70 or 80% of the loch is not viewable from the road anymore.
Do you still continue your research today?
Well, like I say, we don't. Our research is more of the stuff that we're given from other people.
Well, there's no doubt.
We keep an ear on what's going on.
There's no doubt you're continuing the legacy of your fathers, so that's a good thing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and as I said, Michael, the thing is that it's such a fun story. People only you see the controversy of there can't be an animal there. It's made up. It's this, that, and the other. But there's a whole other side to this of some very serious investigating that went on by some highly qualified people, and there's also a lot of fun doing it. It was a tremendous amount of fun.
Hunting for monsters is fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, you and your father, after doing this for quite some time, as you step back and look now at the new generation hunting the Loch Ness, what's your viewpoint on that?
I think sometimes it gets a little lost in translation. I think people's enthusiasm can get a bit carried away. I would love to see another Loch Ness Investigation Bureau type thing start up again, where people came up and donated their time and did scientific, proper research, and also sat there with cameras for the fun of it. For the opportunity, the possibility of finding a real live creature there and making a scientific discovery. I think sometimes it gets a little hijacked, and there's hoaxes, and there's people trying to make a quick buck and stuff. I think that's a shame.
I think it's a beautiful thing if obviously we did find the Loch Ness because there's such the legend and the folklore, but it's like the golden ticket, obviously. But at the same time, if this loch has been Nessie has been in the water, let's just say since the 6th century, unless it has had offspring. Do we really want to find it? I mean, it has been living in peace there in the water for so long.
Right. I think that I would be worried if somebody actually caught it, or if we did find it, then in my mind you're like, now what? You lose a mystery, and like I said before, the world's a richer place for mysteries. It's fun to have and fun to find to chase. I would like it to be found and then protected as an animal.
and also then it vindicates my father, if you like.
Right.
But I have no problem with that because I live with I lived with it all my whole life, and I have absolutely no doubts that there is something very strange in the loch, and new to science. And I think it would be a shame not to pursue it. And I mean that in a scientific sense, not in a hunting sense. If it was then found, I think that tourism numbers would go up, which would only be good for the area. But I also think they would be able to give it some sort of protection, which I think would be a good thing.
That should be the first thing, because if it was found, then you'd see also a rise in poachers trying to make a quick buck and, capture this thing. No telling, same thing with whales. Look what they do with whales, and it's sad. Next thing you know, they become really endangered, as Nessie.
Well, look what they do with aliens. They experiment on. I'm just kidding.
Oh, they experiment on us.
See what I'm talking about?
So, did you get any very, very harsh scrutiny by doing this that really scarred or anything like that?
As when you're growing up, children can be pretty nasty. And the school playground could be a tough place. But I always had the thing in my back pocket that my dad had just been on television as yours. So you could throw that back at them. It was an unusual subject. But during that period of time, during the 60s and 70s, my father did appear on TV fairly frequently. And so that gave me a lot of kudos. So it wasn't really a problem. When I go home now, my friends just accept it. It's not a problem. When I go back to England, the people I grew up with, it's just that my father did that. It was something different. We were, my next door neighbor was a draftsman. He was a designer on Concorde, and the next door neighbor, the other side, was a surgeon. And my dad chased the Loch Ness Monster.
Well, I lived a great life, as a child, but you lived an extraordinary life. The fact that, you got to go, on these excursions and these vacations, and the fact that you were hunting monsters as a child. How many kids did that?
What an awesome spring break story.
No.
Spring break, I hunted the Loch Ness Monster.
No, flip that and reverse it. We hunt ghosts. So it's not that far different, it's just a monster, we hunt ghosts. So basically same book, different title.
Absolutely. Yeah,
True.
Yeah, totally, yeah. And it was. I mean, people on their summer vacations, they would go to the coast or to a different country. We would go to Scotland, but we would go monster hunting for 5 weeks. Yeah,
that's
quite
awesome.
Something to do.
What did your teachers think of you?
Some loved it, and some were very impressed, and others were not so. Others would belittle it and really not see the importance of it. So I didn't care for those ones who didn't enjoy it. That was their problem as far as I was concerned. I knew what fun we were having.
All right, Angus, tell us where we can get your book so people can read up on this fascinating story of your father and you.
Oh, please do, yes. My book, The Man Who Filmed Nessie, and it's the biography on Tim Dinsdale, on his life, from when he was born right the way through to getting the being pirated in China, and then his first trip to Loch Ness, and all the subsequent trips after that when we came along and everything. It's a fun book. It's a good read. It's 80 pictures in the book, and most of them are pictures that have never been seen before. They're from my father's personal collection. You can buy the book from my website, which is themanwhofilmednessie.com. Also, if you want to see my father's film, that's where you can go and view the film. And please share that with your friends, because I just want to get the word out there and show people his work.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on the program, Angus. And God, I hope one day we do catch it. But I hope society takes care of it and not try to make lunch meat out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Michael and Lindsay. Thank you both.
Angus, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure to have you on there, and you have a great week.
All right.
You too.
Thank you again. Bye-bye. Remember to join us back here Wednesday as we have Ken Roberts, clairvoyant medium. He's going to be doing live psychic readings on the air. So be prepared for that. Save your money and quit paying these side store shops like $20 for a palm reading. You get it right here free, only on the Paranormal Beyond when we return Wednesday. Everybody out there, take care. Be safe. Bye-bye. because you've seen it in the news doesn't mean it's real.
So you're telling me you got physically attacked by a ghost?
Like I can tell you right now, I believe in the paranormal more than I believe in our government.
There are so many mysteries out there that are still yet to be explained.
You folks have some of your facts wrong, and you just keep talking about generalities.
With all due respect, sir, you have not brought anything to the table to prove us wrong.
This is the Paranormal and Beyond, and it's your show. Call us at 731-1230. Here again, Michael Knight and Lindsay Knight.
Welcome back to another brand new edition of the Paranormal and Beyond. But first, be sure to check us out at Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com, where you can link up to all the past shows by simply clicking on that archive link above. That's Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com. Ever want to be an actor? Well, here's your chance by simply log on to HollywoodBoundActingAcademy.com. Again, that's HollywoodBoundActingAcademy.com. Special shout out to all those listening worldwide through the KLAV 1230am.com website, and all of you driving around in the Vegas Valley listening to us on your stereos. I'm your host, Michael Knight. Joined alongside of me is Lindsay Knight, Jessica Johns of Wartime Paranormal, and David Gleason of the EOG Sports Hour, which can be heard here on this station Monday through Friday from 10 to 11. How are all of you guys doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm doing good. Yes.
I just brought the show to a screeching halt. You asked me a rhetorical question, and I gave you an answer. And slammed on the brakes.
The mind goes places we do not want to talk about, except for on the show. How are you doing, Lindsay?
I'm doing well. How are you? How's everybody doing tonight?
I just asked that.
Well, I'm asking it too.
That's a copyright infringement of what I just said.
Anyways.
All right, get prepared to get a cease and desist just for that. Jessica, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. It was a long week, but got through it. And, Friday and Saturday's football game.
And witnessed by many. But the question that remains, does the monster that we all know of as Nessie still exist? And does it continue to lurk within the waters of Loch Ness? In a moment, Angus Dinsdale, son of the late, great Nessie hunter Tim Dinsdale, will be joining us on the program to share his father's evidence and work, as well as share his personal adventures seeking out the elusive Loch Ness Monster alongside his father. So get ready, because it's all coming up straight ahead when we return right here on the Talk of Las Vegas, KLAV 1230 AM.
Your ticket to the unknown is at Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com. UFOs, ghosts, aliens, hauntings, mysterious places, and more can be found at Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com. Knights with a K, Paranormal Research Society.com. Based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, Knights Paranormal Research Society is owned and operated by the renowned brother and sister team of Michael and Lindsay Knight. Seeing is believing. And at Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com, you're going to believe. Join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight, for the Paranormal and Beyond. Join host Michael Knight and Lindsay Knight as they investigate the unexplained and most controversial mysteries of the world. The Paranormal and Beyond, where the paranormal lives on and conspiracies exposed. The Paranormal and Beyond, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight. Brought to you by Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com.
Just were crazy, so.
All right.
That was the last hour, Jessica.
I know.
That's my beat. We're here to talk
So bad I wasn't
paranormal.
there.
We're here to talk about the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
All right, we got a great show lined up as we have Angus Dinsdale, which is going to talk about the Loch Ness Monster and his father's work, the late, great Tim Dinsdale, who filmed that famous footage that we all know of today. But first, let's get into today's news.
Topping the news for the Paranormal and Beyond this Monday, December 2nd, bringing you up-to-the-minute news on all the strange and bizarre happenings around the globe. A retired U.S. Army colonel was supposed to receive a burial at Arlington National Cemetery. What the career military man got was degradation beyond words. Joseph Melvin Chapman died at age 80 on November 21st, which his family gathered to lay him to rest. Their sorrow quickly turned to shock and anger as they realized his body had been switched with another dead man's. The Everly Funeral Home in Fairfax mixed up the bodies and dressed the wrong man in the deceased vet's uniform, which he actually worked 28 years to earn. The manager of the Everly Funeral Home said the Chapman was buried in Winchester and that the judge will have to order an examination in order to retrieve the body. In other news, 262 pounds of pot falls from the San Diego sky. 2 people were arrested. These suspected drug dealers got high, really high, but the marijuana they allegedly hope to deliver won't be getting anyone high at all. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection found that 262 pounds of marijuana bundled tightly together in San Diego. 2 men showed up to claim the prize and were quickly arrested. Officials say an ultralight aircraft coming from Mexico dropped the massive payload, which was then tied to a large metal cage, which used to hold cargo, and dropped it in a field. The Office of the Air and Marine tracked the plane as it crossed the border. Reporting the news for the Paranormal and Beyond, this is Lindsay Knight.
Yeah, let that happen in Las Vegas. This town will turn into the zombie apocalypse. There'll be no more food.
No, there wouldn't. And I was about to say that that's not even news in Portland. I lived in Portland for several years, and just pot falling from the sky. It's like every day.
You're trying to say everybody's high there.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, I was going to say, does it really rain pot over there?
No, they...
Ancient creature remains at large, embedded deep within Scottish folklore.
It's an animal big enough to bite a car in half.
Sightings seem to defy scientific explanation.
Did you see something on Loch Ness you cannot explain?
Yes.
Leaving no stone unturned, the hunt is on.
Broadcasting live from the dark and cold dungeons deep beneath the KLAV studios in Las Vegas, Nevada. Prepare yourselves to be taken away into another dimension as we now have control over your thoughts, fears, and perspective of the unexplained world you dare not speak of. With your hosts, Lindsay Knight and Michael Knight. Ladies and gentlemen, we now open the gates to the paranormal and beyond.
Broadcasting live from the KLAV studios in Las Vegas, Nevada, this is the Paranormal and Beyond. As children, we all grow up hearing terrifying stories of monsters hiding underneath our beds, but as we grow older, these tall tales seem to become more of a reality as we start to learn that these monsters do in fact exist. For example, since the 6th century to the present day, in the waters off Loch Ness in the Scottish Highlands, reports of a large unknown beast has been seen.
Metaphorically, it is.
If so, I'm sure that the Jonas Brothers and Miley Cyrus and Demi Lovato make their way over.
The streets smell of pot. You can smell it everywhere you go.
All right, let's get into our main topic because our special guest, Angus Dinsdale, is the author of The Man Who Filmed Nessie, whereupon Angus himself takes great pleasure and pride in sharing his family's involvement chasing the mysterious monster of Loch Ness. Angus draws his own unique experiences of being on many expeditions with his father, the late Tim Dinsdale, who is world-renowned for seeking out the Loch Ness Monster and who also filmed the infamous footage of the creature which we all know of today. Angus himself gives an insider's view of the monster hunting the heydays of the 1960s and 70s in his exciting new biography, The Man Who Filmed Nessie, on which explores Tim's true life adventures from childhood in an imperial China, where he was kidnapped by pirates, to a chance reading of a magazine article which changed his life forever. This true story of a dedicated family man who left his successful career as an aeronautical engineer to find proof of the existence regarding Loch Ness It's no doubt a compelling example of one man's passion and dedication to search for the truth. The Paranormal and Beyond would like to welcome all the way from Vancouver, Canada, Angus Dinsdale. How you doing, Angus?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right, this is a fascinating story, and I mean, as a kid, you grew up actually hunting. So you said hunting monsters.
We did as a family. That was our normal thing to do on our summer holidays, our vacations. Often we would go with my father, the whole family in troop. Off we went, either staying in a variety of guest houses or caravans, or even on boats on the loch.
So, how old were you when you really got into it and started, really knowing what your father was doing?
Well, that's an interesting question, Mark.